When Nigeria passed the Petroleum Industry Act in 2021, the country's oil sector had endured nearly a decade of drift. Investors complained of regulatory uncertainty, opaque fiscal terms, and endless litigation. Output slid. Capital fled, and marginal fields, once touted as engines of indigenous participation, became graveyards of stalled licenses. 4 years on, the picture has begun to change. The PIA has reset the rules of the game. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has embarked on a sweeping divestment program, and regulators have relaunched licensing rounds designed to attract fresh capital. As Nigeria is settling into the gains of the Petroleum Industry Act of 2021 and sets its sights on 2.5 million barrels per day in 2026, recent judicial actions are beginning to create tension in the sector and undermine the ongoing NNPCL divestment and NUPRC 2025 licensing round. Operators, lawyers, and regulators warn that poorly reasoned rulings risk undermining the credibility of the PIA, destabilizing ongoing asset transfers, and sending unsettling signals to both local and international investors at a delicate moment. Joining us on the show to discuss the threats that undisciplined judiciary poses to the Petroleum Industry Act and investments in the oil sector is Olabode Sowunmi, an energy analyst. Good morning, Mr. Sowunmi, and you're most welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, Ayo. It's a pleasure to be here.
Everybody, good morning, and good to have you on the morning show. Well, very quickly, the NUPRC,
Good morning, sir.
in the last conference event they had on licensing round, the second license round, we're talking, the madam in charge, Mrs. Eyesan, I think that's the name.
Yes.
Mrs. Eyesan was talking about
Yes,
providing an enabling environment for investors, attracting investment and all of that. But if you look at the landscape, there's been a lot of litigation, court rulings, particularly at the Federal High Court level. What is the implication of all these rulings for the planned attraction of foreign investment and also, fidelity to the Petroleum Industry Act? How much of a threat would all this confusion in terms of court cases pose to the objective of the NUPRC under the new dispensation?
I think very fundamentally, it speaks to the fact that for technical industries, particularly industries that bring real growth, passing judgments and all that needs to have certain nuances to it. And it's not just in the oil and gas industry. There is an example which has literally crippled a sister industry. In 2015, the court, NEC, after its permission, allowed there to be increase in electricity tariffs. Now, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria then got an injunction stating that I can't remember the details of the case, but the injunction basically stated that the tariff cannot be increased. So as a result, for close to 10 years, the manufacturers were paying a tariff that was not reflective of the devaluation and whatever had happened to the naira. The implication was that it's part of what we see today. There's a liquidity crisis in the power sector. In essence, the cost at which the electricity is sold does not reflect cost of generation, transmission, and the related. But more importantly, if you now translate that to what is happening in the petroleum sector, and in particular in this case where there are litigations, the implication is that the investments, which are not local, because the amounts that we're talking about are in hundreds of millions of dollars, are such that it affects the confidence of those who put in those monies, especially when they are not able to recover it. So in reality and in truth, when these kind of judgments comes in and they do not reflect the nuances and the technical nature, the risks and the amounts that are being put into the industry, it actually hurts the industry. It overall hurts our GDP and hurts our capacity to be able to grow as a nation.
Okay, I don't know how much time we have, but if I can throw this in and you can answer quickly. One of the objectives of the government of Nigeria is to promote local content. And we have some companies like Petrolon and others, going into that space because of the assurance. But some of the companies that have issues now, with litigation and all of that, will be a company like Petrolon. I think there's another one called Uralink. I'm not very familiar with some of these companies. So is government itself, frustrating its own objective of promoting local content? Very briefly.
Yes, inadvertently, yes. But maybe not on purpose, but inadvertently, that is what is happening. The fact is that, take the case of Petrolon. There was an existing licensee on that field, and the licensee did not do anything for over 17 years. In simple terms, he had the license. Nigeria did not get any revenue. They themselves did not get any revenue. There was no employment and all that. And when it was given to another license, in this case was Petrolon, they did a record of drilling 2 oil wells, a record anywhere in the world of drilling 2 oil wells within 12 months. And so when you have court judgments hindering flow of operations of such actions, the implication inadvertently is that even those who have given them hundreds of millions of dollars for that, they begin to wonder what exactly is happening in your nation. And so those are some of the things where people need to engage. This is not a case of pointing fingers really to the judiciary, but it's a case where regulators and government need to engage the judiciary in terms of them understanding the implication of this, so that we don't have a situation where on the long run we are actually hurting ourselves while trying to obey the law. The law was made for man. Man was not made for the law. So the law must ensure that there is progress and that things happen.
Okay, I understand you when you talk about local content, and you actually did speak about this, I think it was about a week ago, on our station, around the walk side by side with local producers or local players and foreign operators, saying that they can exist side by side, and the comments around whether or not local content or local producers had the capacity and could actually utilize the provisions of the PIA. In your estimation, how can we, you gave some suggestions as to how we can support alongside so that we do not lose the essence of local content. How can we strengthen this? How can we ensure that producers locally are able to compete favorably with our foreign counterparts, or at least are able to build capacity to take advantage of the law?
Okay, there are so many examples, but basically the local players must be allowed to play. As of today, in Norway, which is also an oil-producing country, by the way, they produce over 2 million barrels per day, which is slightly more than what we produce. When they started oil production, which was after us in the early 70s, there was no capacity within the Norwegian energy environment for development of oil. And today, they are competing. Now, basically what has happened is the same principle of promoting local content. They engaged Americans at the time. They engaged the British people who had experience within the North Sea, and they ensured that there was local content participation. The truth be told, that if we do not have a dedicated, stubborn focus for local capacity, nobody else will do it. Today, we talk about the Gas Master Plan. However, the Gas Master Plan was a stubborn idea that Nigeria has internal market, and that internal market should be exploited so that gas prices externally does not cause us to suffer. Now, we have not gotten to that stage, but one of the things that has happened is that we have a lot of industries that are gas-based. And those industries, for the first time, are giving us the opportunity to have even development. And in fact, one of the things that have come with the Gas Master Plan is the very idea that you can have an industry in every local government supporting local capacity. When that actually happens, it means that rural-urban migration will be a thing of the past. And it means that only people who really need to come to the cities will come to the cities. Those things are impossible without local content. Those things are impossible without developing the capacity of local companies like Petroleum, companies that have invested energy, who have taken risk, and who have given their capacity and their all to ensure that we live a more prosperous life.
Okay. So a couple of things. Yes, we have a conundrum. We should be able to develop local capacity. But at the same time, you have people and players in the industry that seek external help because it's easy and the time to develop local capacity is a long one. You have litigations. You have people that when they get the license, you think they ought to start something on the wells, but they just keep it in some cases to be able to use it as a bargaining chip. Because we've also heard of people that they get these licenses, they keep them, they used to take heavy bank loans, they can't service the bank loans, they exploit people. Then you have this long drawn-out litigation fight that happens afterwards. The question I'll say here is, how can we bring sanity to fraudulent people in the system? How can we second-guess and double-check and double-verify people that come in with a fraudulent intent in this ecosystem?
Okay, so I think it was the late MK Abiola that said that because the midwife is a bad woman or a witch, does not mean we should throw away the baby or we should kill the baby. In every system or anything that involves human beings, anywhere in this world, no matter how perfect the system, as long as it's involving human beings, there will be bad eggs. That needs to be understood as a given. And in part of those efforts to remove or weed out the bad elements, that we have laws, we have regulations, we have policies, and we have law enforcement agencies. So the responsibility to separate the chaff from the grain is not really on the players who are trying to make their own path and chart out a path to prosperity. It is rested on law enforcement. So there is a particular skill, particular expertise, particular knowledge and history that is required to be able to function perfectly within law enforcement. Those are not engineering skills. Those are not skills within the energy industry. Those are skills for those who are dedicated to law enforcement. So that aspect of weeding out bad elements is purely 100% the responsibility of law enforcement.
A small clarification. Just a small clarification. I heard you saying earlier that in the national interest, since the Nigerian government has an objective in terms of having a higher productivity in the oil and gas sector, that the government should also, talk to the judiciary so that the judiciary does not, frustrate the overall national interest. How? The judiciary is supposed to be independent. They are not in the business of, taking directives from the executive, except I heard you wrongly. Would you like to clarify that?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So talking to the judiciary is totally different from giving them instruction. I mean, nobody has the right and should have that kind of right. But there are programs. I mean, I lived in the U.S. briefly when I was working with Ericsson, and part of the U.S. judiciary, the judiciary as well as the U.S. Congress where I was functioning with, was that they had what they call Industry Day. On an industry day, the members of the U.S. Congress will listen to those in a particular industry, say telecoms. And on that day, because it is not a hearing, it is not adversarial, so they will listen to the issues in the industry so that when the congressmen are adjudicating or debating, they can reflect what is really the nuances in the industry so that you don't have a situation where legislation is working against real industry. Now, what happens in the industry proper? An example like I gave was in the case of the power sector. What the power sector now did after that is that I think once a year, they have a conference that involves just the judiciary. And in that conference, they make presentations and speak to the issues, the nuances of the industry. And then people ask questions from the side of they do it in conjunction with the NJC. And everybody goes home. Nobody is told this or this, but the knowledge of how the power sector is important to our progress and prosperity is passed across. And that information is necessary for everybody. Nobody is all-knowing. Omniscience is a supernatural thing. So there must be a channel, a pathway for the knowledge that is required for them to make more informed decisions as the judiciary to be passed across. And that is a human thing. It's not going to come from heaven.
Just one question for me. Would you recommend specialized energy courts based on what you just said, or just this conference as you've, very briefly, would you recommend specialized energy courts to sort out these issues you've identified?
A specialized energy court will not be a bad idea, but a more knowledgeable judiciary will equally be effective. So both cases, and the two can work together.
Okay, well, excellent. Thank you so very much for your time with us this morning, Mr. Olabode Sowunmi.